Don's Wife, Chapter 6, Part 3. When a very sleepy and groggy Rajni opened the door, she received a chastening greeting from Kamini. "Don't tell me, bitch, that you have already taken in another boarder." They both hugged warmly and tightly. The inevitable happened. 3 days later, as arranged, Professor Sathe was on his flight to New York. Now on, the flights for the rest of his family and Kamini had taken a definite different course. For the former, it was the hope for many more flights leading to high diplomatic tables and international power blocks, with world being their oyster, and for the other, it was to be a challenge for chartering a new and unknown flight path on her own. Sinews of blood relationship were found to be weaker than the tenaciousness of ambitions and aspirations. There was a puja in Champavila. After the Arti Vandana, at the priest's beckoning, when R.D. moved among the guests to offer them the jyot, he came face to face with Kamini. In the bare 2 or 3 seconds that she was in front of him to take the jyot, he noticed complete serenity on her face with no trace of tension whatsoever. Her stoicism surprised him and impressed him immensely, for he knew that there had to be something out of the ordinary in her unexpected arrival. Guests were many congregating around the puja sthal, hence he moved on. It was Champa's Barsi, her death anniversary, the only ritual that both R.D. and Harsh held sacrosanct. It was always attended by a large number of people, despite a severe restrictiveness on the list of invitees for security reasons. Most of the attendees were old fellow workers and employees of R.D.'s various enterprises, overt and covert, who had been closely associated with him for many years. To almost every one of them, Champa had been a dependable benefactress at all times. The entire campus, as well as the interior of the villa, was streaming with people. And like always, there were nearly as many plain-clothed security men among them as there were guests. Kamini could also be ushered in only with Bhau's direct intervention, as she did not have an entry pass. But seeing the size of the congregation, she thought it prudent to return another day for the purpose she had come for. Even R.D. and Harsh, who were unaware of the latest development, had to be careful. For what they had experienced during the last few days, they couldn't have acknowledged her openly in their concern for keeping the relationship unobtrusive for the sake of Sathe's. She explained the situation to Bhau and left, without revealing the bit about her final parting of ways with her parents. But R.D. had a sharp nose. He had already smelt the coffee, having learned that Kamini was back at Rajni's place and Professor Sathe had already left for New York. He was also perceptive enough to know that she was a proud and self-respecting person who might feel hesitant to come again on her own volition, even if she might truly want to do so. He couldn't take a chance of losing her. He, thus, decided to facilitate her arrival at his place again, in order to help her open up to him without at all compromising her dignity. Once again, he was tempted to draw from his streak for theatrics and enterprise. It looked more like the main lounge of a busy airport rather than that of a modern hospital for the sheer numbers of people milling about. Bhau met her at the main entrance itself and personally cleared her from the security. Ignoring the long queues in front of the elevators, he took her to the end of a corridor where one of the service lifts was already kept in waiting for them. Amazingly, unlike what she had witnessed at the ground floor, the small lounge and the short corridor at the 21st floor were nearly empty. She could sense that even the hospital staff and a few attendant types who hung about were all sanitized or were the security personnel in civil. Atmosphere looked very somber as they walked to the last suite at the end of the corridor. The tap on the door was answered by a very polite nurse who left as they entered. R.D. was laid on the bed. Some contraptions covered his mouth as well. She stood still just inside the closed door for a few seconds, unable to determine what she ought to be doing. The grimness of the room gripped her. Then she realized that she had brought a bouquet of flowers which she had picked up on the way. She moved to the window alongside the bed and replaced the flowers in the vase which was placed on the broad sill. The vast blueness of the Arabian Sea merging into the horizon and interspersed here and there with toy-like boats now looked even more bewitching with the tantalizing colors of the flowers placed in a corner of the window. But as she turned to the bed, she was in for a surprise. R.D. was pulling himself up to sit by the aid of the bedrest. He had already removed the contraption from his mouth and looked perfectly normal and hale and hearty, quite unlike someone who was supposed to have had a major operation at night. Her mouth fell open just as she heard him say to the attendant in the room, "Okay, folks, let's get the parathas out." She was aghast as she looked at him and then at Bhau in disbelief. She stuttered, But you said that he had to undergo an emergency angina operation." "One has to say all that, beta. How else would have he gotten you here to share your parathas with us?" He said, cutting her quite innocently. "My parathas?" She was more shocked. "Yes, the parathas you cooked in the morning before he," R.D. said, pointing at Bhau, "phoned you to say that I was in the hospital. My nose told me that they were very delicious parathas, and we didn't want you to go without them when you had made them with so much love." He was beaming. She also enjoyed the game now and said teasingly, "But I haven't brought any parathas with me. I just ran after receiving Bhau's call." "Don't worry about that, beta. It was Bhau this time. My courier has managed all that. His motorbike was faster than your auto rickshaw. Your parathas are already here." "Oh God, I give up. You are impossible, you two." She was laughing with real happiness. As the parathas were laid out in the paper plates, which also had been brought, she again commented on their audacity. "But aren't you worried about the doctors and all that? How do they tolerate all this?" "Well, I guess they have little choice, knowing that the Champa Trust has paid for 3 floors of the hospital and continues to meet all the expenses of theirs, including the staff salaries," said Bhau cheekily. "Besides, beta, this particular suite is reserved for our family. Hence, I suppose we can take a bit of a liberty," said R.D. as he chewed on a bite of the paratha and then exclaimed, "What a delicious paratha!" Then suddenly he said, part jovially and part dramatically, but certainly very meaningfully, "Sorry, beta, I've changed my mind. After having these parathas, I can't let you go anywhere else. You have to come to my house as my son's bride. And that's final. Everybody bursts into another round of laughter. But even as she laughed, she also had little tears in her eyes. Tears of joy, tears of happiness, tears of sheer amazement. She was so overcome with emotion that she had to apologize herself to go to the washroom. As she blew her nose and dried her eyes in front of the mirror, she kept wondering on this man's perceptiveness. How simply and how effortlessly he unknotted the whole thing, without putting his foot on her foot even a tiny bit, without compromising her dignity even slightly. How can someone say so much and so beautifully without saying anything at all? She felt very happy, truly very happy, as she returned to them. Everybody had understood everything, and their faces were beaming. Harsh and Kamini got married on the appointed date itself, the date which was originally decided by the priests. But it was an extremely simple ceremony. The bride and the groom and some 24 chosen guests, all very close to the Jadhavs, besides R.D. himself, Bhau and of course Rajni and Jamuna, assembled at the Arya Samaj temple, and within an hour the marriage was solemnized. The Kanyadan was performed by Jamuna, since well before the date of the wedding, Sudha had conveniently left for a long trip abroad, ostensibly on account of Mary's delivery in the USA. A perfect foil to escape an embarrassing situation. Only a few keepsake photographs were taken by a carefully chosen photographer, and the solitary roll of film which was allowed to him was taken possession of as soon as the job was done. There was a strict embargo on any kind of publicity of the marriage to scotch any possibility of a speculation connecting R.D. with Professor Sathe. 3 days after the wedding, Harsh and Kamini left for London. They had booked a chalet near Gasmere in Lake District, right in the midst of the beautiful Wordsworth country in north of England for a short honeymoon. The plan was that after a 10-day honeymoon, they would return to London, where Harsh would join his course, and after spending another week together in London, Kamini would return to Mumbai. She would prepare for her final exams, which were due in early March. That would coincide with Harsh's return after the completion of his first semester. After Holi, they would again leave for London together, to be in time for the beginning of Harsh's spring semester. At last, R.D. was on the threshold of realizing his dreams. Dreams he had always dreamt of. End of Chapter 6, Part 3.